Okay. Okay, that's a bit much. Good afternoon. This is Jeremy Grandstaff. I'm very excited to be hosting you today on Coffee with Jeremy. And I just want to actually start by saying, and I normally would not do this, but I want to recognize the DoubleTree in downtown Omaha for allowing me to co-opt their bar in order to shoot this week's Coffee with Jeremy episode. So very excited to be here and to be with all of you. We are really excited today to host Pam, who is the Executive Director of the National Physical Activity Society. And so,
Hi.
Pam, I want to just take a second to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to the group and maybe tell us a little bit more about what the society does. And then I'll kind of talk about how we fit into that.
Sure. Hi, Jeremy. Hi, Jeremy's helper at S&G. John, I am Pam Eidson, and
John.
I am Executive Director of the National Physical Activity Society. We grew out of a public health mission with state public health folks and local public health people, and now have nonprofits and others added to that to work on training opportunities for people who are trying to promote physical activity. A lot of our folks are working on bike lanes and sidewalks and ensuring that people can walk from one place to another. Where's the connectivity? They're in private-public partnerships in their cities and states around the country. And we do monthly webinars for them. We do other trainings as able and as funded to do so. And we issue a report every year on small towns, rural communities that are doing some changes like this. And right now we're in the middle of our biennial survey of what our member needs are for training.
So so first of all, Pam, I'm really excited that you're here. And one of the things that was very exciting to me is we had the opportunity at S&G to facilitate your board retreat, and that was my first exposure to the society. It was really neat to just look at all the programming that you guys are doing and all the ways that you are serving. I think if I read on your website, it was like 48,000 members or member organizations or something along those lines. Sorry.
Well, they did a survey a couple
Yeah.
of years ago, actually predating me coming in. There was a survey that said that they were serving 8,000 organizations that had a reach of 20 million people. So it depends on how you look at it. I mean, we don't have that many members signed up right now. It's certainly nowhere near 48,000. But we do have a number of people in every state across the country.
Gotcha. And John, just so you know, I turned off my camera for just a moment because I'm having a bandwidth issue, and I don't want to stop the conversation. I wanted to. So it's very interesting to me because I kind of had that same thing happen to me when I used to work for the Alliance for Biking and Walking. We had 140 organizations. We had over 135,000 members because of all of those organizations' members. And then when you talk about reach, you do get into that millions piece. So I love that that is kind of a parallel thing, I think, in the way that we do that. One of the things that stuck out to me when I was preparing for this is it says on your website that you guys have a public health philosophy. And I think just doing the work that we're doing with the Nebraska Department of Public Health on our other Walkable Communities project, I'm really just beginning to understand what that means, a public health philosophy. And I don't know that many people do. So if you have, I'm sure you get asked that question a lot, and I thought maybe you could share some info, like what that means.
Sure. Well, back in 1988, the Institute of Medicine published a book called The Future of Public Health. And I'm going to, of course, forget right here on the spot what one of the major things was from that, but it was about assessment, policy, and assurance. And so ensuring we had different approaches that captured all of the people in the community, that measured, first of all, what the needs are, that looked at policies to see that they covered those needs, and that ensured that people who might otherwise get left out are then included. And so most public health programs since then have followed those, and then there's been these kind of 10 essential services that public health departments provide. And those things that deal with chronic disease prevention and the things that deal with population-based primarily I'm looking at preventive measures in tobacco control, healthy eating, and physical activity. For these three, they're considered the primary prevention aspects. They have some elements in common when you look at what are those three areas for assessment, policy, and assurance. And so looking at public health approaches is another way of saying we're not really about the folks who are teaching fitness classes one-on-one. That's not really where we are, although several and many of our members actually do that. But we are looking at how do you look at a population base and assess those needs, look and see whether the policies align with the needs as far as public health needs go, and then assure that people are not being left out. So in this case, if I wanted to apply this to physical activity, for example, we look at where are the data on physical activity. We see whether Americans are actually doing enough physical activity. In most cases, you know the answer to that one. In some places, it's better than in others, and among some ages, it's better than in others, and in some ages, it's actually increasing. So then we look at what are the policies. Like, for example, at the schools, is the policy in a school supportive of physical activity? And does that apply across that school district? Does it apply across the whole state? Is there a state policy like there is in Oregon that says that kids have to get daily physical education or physical activity? And then we look also to what are the assurances that we aren't leaving populations out. Is the town walkable for people who have mobility issues, for example? And you learn lots of stuff when you're doing things like that. Like stoplights are timed so that you can get all of the cars through the intersection, but they're only but the walking pedestrian light is only timed so that you can get the first person through the intersection. And so, we want it to be accessible to everybody, whether they are the fastest moving pedestrians out there or the ones who take a little bit more time.
Now, as much work as I do, Pam, and at one point I think biking and walking was a very large chunk of our advocacy organization strategic planning business at one time. And I didn't actually know that that's how the stoplights were timed, that it was for the first pedestrian. So that's kind of interesting to me, and makes a lot of things make sense now.
Doesn't it, though?
It really does. So, Pam, one of the things that I had said at the beginning is that we facilitated a board retreat for you guys, and it was really exciting to watch your board come together. You guys are a board that is representative of the U.S., I believe, as a whole, right? And do you also go into Canada or no?
We are mostly U.S. Our mission covers U.S. We do have members who come from other countries, yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I remember we met with your board back in January, and what I thought I'd do is just talk a little bit about what that process was like, and then give you an opportunity to talk about what were some of the aspects of it that you liked, and how it may have been helpful it's for you as the executive director, and as you guys are moving the organization forward. And so what we did with the board retreat, the first thing that we always try to do, as we've discussed in some recent episodes of Coffee with Jeremy, is we put together kind of a design team. Now, in Pam's case, I believe the design team was one or two additional people besides her and the board chair, maybe 3 or 4. I think it was a total team of 5, if I remember correctly.
Right.
And yeah, that sounds about right. And we met virtually one time. I remember for sure, and we could have actually squeezed a second meeting in there, but I think we had a timing thing. So we met once. We really got very clear about what they wanted to get out of the board meeting, what were some of the conversations they felt like they needed to have while they were there. And in this case, it was a board retreat, so we did not have a lot of discussion, as we normally do as a design team, around who needs to be part of that conversation, because it was really about the board piece.
Right.
I think the design part of it was very tight on this one. I just think it was a timing thing. So,
as I recall, we started
course,
just before the holidays, and then we kept going, and we actually had the meeting in mid-January, so there wasn't a whole lot of planning time. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And then we got to the board meeting, and essentially their board retreat had some visioning aspects at it. It had some discussion around how do we best accentuate the benefits of partners and the benefits of members. And it had really kind of some, if you will, action around those two particular populations and how the organization was serving those populations. Um, and I think without getting into all of the detail, because I wouldn't want to bore anybody with all the nitty gritty pieces of it, I think looking at evaluations, people really felt that, they seem to feel that it was a pretty helpful retreat to you guys. Pam, what are you thinking from your perspective? What are some of the highlights from the retreat for you, or maybe even ways that it's helping you guys today?
Well,
We
okay,
could
so
actually do both of them.
yeah, first off, let's go with some of the highlights first. And I'll tell you that our organization has a very low budget. We do have a lot of volunteers who put in time on the organization, and our board members are just some of those. But this was the first time that our board had actually come together during the time that I've been executive director, which is now 2 years. So it was really a good opportunity for everybody to even see each other and work face to face instead of just on the telephone. And they got a chance to really talk about some of the things that they'd sort of touched on by phone during board meetings over the past, well, however long each of them had been serving. And one of those issues that had come up repeatedly was, is our mission large enough to encompass all of what we're doing? So like you said, looking at the visioning, looking at the mission, making sure that they really capture the scope of what it is that we want to see the National Physical Activity Society doing. And then, as you also mentioned, we got into these discussions, and it was interesting because you broke our groups, you broke our larger group into two groups, and they both talked about this, members and partners, and how we as an organization are serving both of those constituencies. And do you know, Jeremy, that it actually is interesting that you said, what are we getting out of it today? Because we went back from that retreat. We had dyads and triads, small groups working together on the mission, on the vision, and on the member and partner value statements. And do you know that a week ago they voted in the new statements? So we now have adopted the clearer vision and the clearer mission and the value statements of our society to partners and to members.
John, that deserves the applause for the sound effects from our Google library here. I'm not sure John really was on top of that one, but I was clapping at least because that is really great, and I'm really very happy for you. There we go. The audience is a little slow sometimes here at Coffee with Jeremy. No, I think that's absolutely awesome, and that's what we dream of for this process, or that's what we really know, if it's ran right, that it's going to be able to continue to evolve, and those statements are going to evolve as you guys move forward. From your perspective, was it helpful to have somebody outside of that conversation facilitating that? I know that's a question that we get a lot from our client, or for our potential clients, is why use somebody outside?
Well, I think really there's an internal question about that that's very helpful to think about. And for me, and as someone who has frequently been put in the position of facilitating, as executive director, as staff, I'm sometimes the logical person to be put into that position. And this is, not the first job where that's happened. And it means that I'm serving two roles. I'm both trying to be impartial and facilitate across the whole room, while also fulfilling the role of providing information that would be helpful to the group. And so I found that from an internal perspective, it's very difficult to manage both of those roles at the same time. So that's an argument, I think, in favor of outside facilitation, because then you get someone who doesn't have to contribute a lot of the content to the discussion and can focus on ensuring that everybody's participating and on moving the agenda along.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that's excellent. So you guys have basically a new kind of messaging, or I would probably call it more of a framing strategy or something along those lines. There's always more to be done. in your area. One of the things that I've always recognized, especially in the nonprofit world, is there's always that next step, right? And where we're heading and what that looks like. And I would say getting the board to adopt that, when we see that happen, that's a major milestone in the process. But what's next for NPAS? So you were talking about the survey. What else do you guys have in the works? And by the way, before I turn this back over to you to talk about that, I want to just tell people I attended a fabulous webinar with Mark Fenton that you guys hosted, I think a month and a half ago. I might be wrong on the time frame, but it was very helpful to get Mark's take on things and to hear where he was coming from and how he's handled different communities and working with them. So I just wanted to thank you for hosting that. That was something that has really been helpful to us as we're working on the Nebraska Walkable Communities Project piece.
Excellent.
So, but what else is happening at NPAS? What else are you guys working on?
That's excellent. I'll just mention, too, that Mark Fenton, who is a guru in the walking world, in fact, he wrote a book that's sitting behind me on walking, among other things. We did have a webinar with him in February, and it is on our website at physicalactivitiessociety.org. If anybody is interested in watching it, it is available for free viewing on our website. We have a series of webinars that our professional development team puts together, and we just had one this week on working with people with disabilities and committing to inclusion. We have one coming up next week where we're going to talk about, sorry, not next week, but next month, where we're going to talk about messaging and some research that another organization has done that has found out about terms that are somewhat turnoffs, I guess, to people out there in the audience that we're trying to reach. And so we're anxious to learn a lot more about what they have found by doing focus groups and polls and such with folks on terminology that we use in public health. As you well know, a lot of our terminology can be very jargonistic, and a lot of it means something within public health that it doesn't mean outside of that. And you get the same thing, I'm sure, in cycling and in walking. Now, another thing that we're working on is our local outreach. This started from state health departments. We have added local health departments, but we have not added many local health departments. So while we have a lot of folks who are working at the community level who take part in our webinars and who might consider themselves members, we don't have people necessarily representing local health departments, and that local outreach is one of our major goals right now. This came out of the retreat. It was actually something we had talked about before then, so it wasn't a surprise that it was going to come out of the retreat, but it was certainly emphasized, I think, by the groups when they talked with each other at the retreat, that we really need to emphasize the local level. So increasing our membership of local level folks who are working in the 3,000 counties around the country on public health issues related to physical activity is one of our goals. Another thing that we're doing is promoting the concepts in the Surgeon General's Step It Up call to action on walking and walkability. That was released in September, and we continue to do social media messages with that. The latest on that is that NPAS, my organization, is involved in a campaign with the Everybody Walk Collaborative right now in April that focuses on walk at work. And so if you happen to be in an office, then maybe you get up a couple of times a day and take a walk around the block, or maybe go walk outside with your colleagues and talk with them about a project, or even take the stairs when you get there in the morning. If you're in a 16-story building and you have to be at the top floor, then that can be a good way to get a little bit more activity into your day. So that's 3 things that are happening. And we're also involved in some national activities that are happening, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that just this morning, one of the groups that I'm involved with, the National Physical Activity Plan Alliance, released its updated National Physical Activity Plan in Washington, D.C. And so that should be in the news today to talk about the updated sectors of the National Physical Activity Plan with their strategies and tactics that are about finding ways to get more activity for all Americans. And so that press conference was this morning. I think they were doing congressional briefings along with that today. And the new physical activity plan is up on their website so that people can download that or go and do interactive to look at what the different strategies are.
That is a lot of stuff going on, Pam, that you're in charge of, and I think it's really very helpful. talk to our viewer, because I'm sure there's at least a couple people saying, what is this call to action on walking? I don't understand that, especially people who aren't as engaged in physical activity or strategic initiatives to increase walking or physical
Sure.
activity as you and I are. So what is that? What is
What
the
does it
Surgeon
mean?
General's? Yeah.
Sure. Well, for one thing, I think that there's a misconception among many, many people, including those who exercise and those who don't, that in order to get any benefit out of exercise, you have to do a heck of a lot of it in a very short period of time. So you get your weekend warriors, you get your people who join in January and go for 12 days to the gym, and they do it very, very intensely. They get sore, they get injured, or they just get tired of doing it all that intensely, and they stop. So what the walking and walkability call to action about is demonstrating that with just walking, we have to use that terminology, just walking, that you can get enough physical activity. You can raise your heart rate enough. For people who have not been doing a lot of exercise, it's a good way to get started on doing it. It's also a good lifetime long exercise. So I was down at the beach in Florida in February, and I saw walking along the beach tons of senior citizens in their jackets on a cold beach in North Florida in February, and it was a good reminder that this is an activity that you can do lifelong. So walking and walkability was a focus that under one of the previous Surgeon Generals, Dr. Regina Benjamin, there was an announcement, and it was put out in the Federal Register for comment, and there were teams that were put together to work on it, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and partners of theirs worked on the content for it and wrote this call to action. And the Surgeon General Murthy released it in September as a sort of a not even just a reminder, but sort of introducing the concept that walking is a way to get your physical activity. You don't have to do a lot more than that to get the health benefits of physical activity, and that walking is one of the first ways that you start to see signs that your health is improving. So lowering blood pressure from taking walks, for example, that's one of the first things that happens. Getting your heart rate to your resting heart rate lower. Of course, it's higher while you're walking, but it's lower when you get done with that. So you get benefits almost immediately. And one of the things that's emphasized in this call to action is that walking is something that you can do without a whole lot of equipment. It might be more pleasant if you have some good shoes, but you can do it without a whole lot of expensive equipment. You can do it indoors. You can do it out. There are lots of places that you can walk, and in the snowy climates in the winter months, you've got a lot of businesses and or downtown areas or malls that have enclosed spaces that people can walk in, and so folks have been doing that. And that's one of the messages that we're trying to promote, is that walking is accessible for almost everyone, and in particular to demonstrate that wheelchair rolling is another form of walking. So the Surgeon General particularly said to walk and wheelchair roll as a way to demonstrate that this is something for almost everybody.
Interesting. And we're going to keep talking with Pam here, but just a reminder, you can get any questions to us or get any comments that you want to make. For those of you who may be watching this live, for some reason my control panel is not telling me if anybody is. But for those of you who may be, you can always send your questions in via hashtag Coffee with Jeremy on on Twitter, or in the chat box on YouTube. So, Pam, what I would ask this question to you, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot a little bit, and I hope that's okay. If you don't want to go there, tell me. But what was your overall experience like working with us as a company to try to facilitate that retreat for you?
Well, I've been in public health for over 20 years, Jeremy, and so of course I've been through several of these kinds of planning sessions, as you might imagine. And I think that one thing that I have found that is really helpful is the prep work up front. And you get those folks who show up for the day, and they do a great job of starting the people in the morning on what they need to learn and do. And then by the end of the day, they have however far they've gotten along. But when there's a lot of more prep work up front, when you've There have already been, for example, in this case, we had some board interviews, and we had 2 or 3 meetings with that planning team, and you learned about what the board interviews had revealed before you came to visit with us. All of that prep work up front, I think, helped in ensuring that what we covered on that day was where we needed to go. Now, it happened to be a little bit of a surprise to me. So, for example, I wasn't sure that whether we were going to get to a full strategic plan by the end of the day, but it turned out that these questions that were on people's minds, on the board members' minds, were more critical than going directly into what strategies and actions. They wanted to make sure that we were solid on our needs for vision and for mission and for demonstrating what our value is to our members and our partners. And so that's something that they decided to work on, and it was very valuable to be able to go that way. And so that's another credit, I think, Jeremy, is that being able to have that flexibility.
Gotcha, and I appreciate that. We've had a couple recently. I think Kimberly, one of our co-consultants on another project, we were kind of talking about that same type of situation maybe 3 months before that with a lot of leaders on a DC project. And so it's really very exciting to hear that that actually worked and that we were responsive to you guys in that. So I'm not seeing any questions on Twitter or in the chat box. We've got about 3 minutes left with Pam. Pam, what I would say is we're just going to give just a second in case anybody has a question that they'd like to ask. We do have some viewers, and so we're really excited that you're joining us this week. And just a big shout out to Doubletree, where we're working today or this afternoon, and has kind of become a volunteered host for my office today. And for Coffee with Jeremy. So I'm not seeing any questions coming in, and so I think we're going to actually turn it back to you, Pam, and ask, is there anything else that you'd like to leave our viewers with about either your experience with us or what your organization is doing? How can they get involved? I know because you serve more of the public health department, so if our viewers aren't part of that, how can they plug into this health thing? I think is really the question.
Jerry, that's a great question, because I think that, like I said before, I think people think that exercise has to be more difficult than it is. And one way to get involved is by starting to talk to people about walking, and that walking is a way to get physical activity without having to be all that intense. You don't have to do it every single day. Now, I happen to do it every single day. I'm on a streak here at about 270 days in a row. But I think that not everybody has to do it that much. You should aim for about 150 minutes a week. And if you have a parent or a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle who is not currently all that active, encouraging them to do that is a good way to get them started. And I also want to tell you, Jeremy, just because we did talk about this some, but we haven't actually mentioned what any of our mission or vision work ended up being, that our organization is, what we're really looking for to happen as a vision is that physical activity is prioritized, that it's embraced, and that it's promoted for everyone in the United States. So we want to see that for all people, whether they're young or old, whether they have mobility issues, whether they whether they live in a place that hasn't necessarily catered to them before, whether they're part of the working population or not, that physical activity is prioritized and embraced and promoted for everyone in the United States. And so that's what we're looking for. There are resources on our website if people want to start to look, and there are links to lots of other resources on our website too, and that's at physicalactivitysociety.org.
Excellent, Pam, and I'm actually really glad that you brought us back to that, because I totally remember thinking I wanted to ask that, and then it slipped off my mind. But again, just a big congratulations to you guys on the board coming together for that first retreat in person, since you were the ED, and all the work that they did in creating their revised mission and vision and the messaging components and the strategic components that you got out of that. It takes a lot to come together and put that together, and so my hats are off to your board. let's see, other things that people, and just a big thank you to Pam for being on here. I really felt that we were able to tell the story of what your organization has been doing and is up to, and I think it's more important for people, I think it's very important for people to understand more about that piece of the equation, especially the public health piece. It's something that I'm really coming to understand more. So thank you for all the work that you do.
And thanks for the
Just a reminder,
opportunity to
you
talk about that, Jeremy. I appreciate the opportunity today.
Yeah, it's been fun actually. This is I think I would venture to say this has probably been one of our more entertaining and exciting and engaging Coffee with Jeremy. So we're getting better, and so please stay tuned next week to coffeewithjeremy.tv, where you can find an episode every Wednesday. I'm meeting with a new either collaborator, partner, or client that we're working with here at S&G Endeavors. Remember, we're all about helping you bring your stakeholders together to collaborate, create change, and take action. And so if you think that we may be helpful to you, your business, your team, your organization, or your community, feel free to reach out and let me know that as well. You can find more information at sgendeavors.com. And a big thanks to John, who heads up the SG Media Group division of our company. SG Media Group is working to create collaborative virtual, I will just say virtual collaboration in many different ways. And you can find more information on them at sgemediagroup.com. So again, check out physicalactivitysociety.org. Pam, thank you so much for allowing us to be part of your retreat and to help you guys with that. Look forward to possibly working together more, and thank you for coming on today and telling your story. It's been really great talking with you.
It's been a pleasure, Jeremy. Thank you.
And this concludes Coffee with Jeremy. Thank you so much. Have a great day.